Welcome, everybody, to the Sentinels of Liberty podcast. I am your host, Redbeard, and I am here to tell you that, boy, has it been a wild last week and a half, almost 2 weeks for me. There's a lot going on, and then on top of that, on top of some various things going on, I have had just like the worst time with production for whatever reason. It would appear that my ability to create thumbnails and all of that, the thing that I use for my thumbnails and so many other things has just been like catastrophically working against me on overtime. I am working through that to the best of my ability. But man, I'm here to tell you, sometimes it really does feel like you're up going upstream without a paddle, and it just seems like you just keep getting swept away. So, but with that being said, we are here. There is no thumbnail tonight because, again, my image creator decided it wanted to wage anarchy on me, and so we are in actual negotiations to figure out if the operating system is going to work. So, stay tuned for that. Hopefully, we'll be back in the normal swing of things before you know it. So what is tonight about? Well, first and foremost, there's no housekeeping, so don't worry about that. Tonight's conversation is about it's kind of my rebuttal to Pete Hegseth's address, and there is the way I'm going to go about this, because there's a lot of things that were said that really they didn't stick out to me in terms of, like, oh yeah, that's a crazy thing or whatever the case is. But there were a couple parts that stuck out to me. And there's also something that Trump said after Pete finished that I'm going to touch on here a little bit as well. But there are a couple areas that I feel really do merit some attention. So without further ado, let's jump into part of what his address was about and kind of identifying the key areas that I felt were really important to highlight and what my take is and overall what the founders would have evaluated his address or his speech to be. As always, anytime I delve into something like this, I am going to have some notes, so you'll have to forgive me if I look away every so often, just to kind of reference some of the things that rattle on inside my head. So for an opening, I just want to kind of posit something here. So recently, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth declared to U.S. commanders that pacifism is so naive and dangerous. And in addition, we owe our republic a military that will win any war we choose. Now, again, these words might sound really strong. They might sound really good, patriotic even, and even determined. But we have to look at what it is that he was saying, right? And I do feel that words do have meaning. They do have weight. And when weighted against the founders' wisdom, they really are kind of troubling. And we're going to delve into this as we move forward here. They echo the voice of empire, but not a republic. And we're going to break this down a little bit and kind of see why that seems to be the case. They reflect the mindset of rulers, but not guardians. And in addition, the founders, they really weren't pacifists, if you want to go down that route. They wasn't necessarily about pacifism. Rather, they fought a revolution, and they did bear arms, and they sacrificed. They understood the cost of war. They understood the cost that war had not only on the people that fought them, but also on the people that had to endure it. And they were also men of restraint, though. Prudence and principle. In addition to that, they warned that war is the most dangerous enemy of liberty. And in addition to that, that entanglements abroad invite corruption at home. And we most certainly do see that corruption as it exists here at home. And that only the people, through their representatives in Congress, may actually authorize war. Something that seemingly we've forgotten. There's this idea that unilateral executive power has the ability to just whimsically go and declare war and bomb countries and destroy places at whim simply because we say that there's an enemy over here or an enemy over there, but that's not the case, and that's not the way that things are supposed to operate. And we'll dive into that a little bit. But tonight we test Hegseth's doctrine against the Founders' Warnings. And I love the Founders' Warnings series that I've been doing mostly, and I know that seems kind of selfish, but one, I find that it's fun to go through these things, but I hope that it also presents something to all of you who watch as something that's informative and something that perhaps provides a little bit more perspective on why things may or may not be in line with the Constitution, liberty, or rights. So moving on, we're going to take a look here real quick in the first section of what it is that I want, of my rebuttal here or my observations, whatever you'd like to call it. And we're going to look at pacifism versus prudence, right? Hegseth's claim is that pacifism is dangerous, it's naive, and leaves us vulnerable. This is essentially his assertion and his claim that he put forth in his address to these U.S. military commanders, right? That for whatever reason, that this is overwhelmingly weak and, it's not strong, right? But when we go back and we look at the founders' reality on this, they did not promote pacifism, actually, but instead, they strongly cautioned against aggression and intervention. So, in essence, they didn't feel the need of intervention. They were, for all intents and purposes, non-interventionists, and they didn't feel that leading with the aggression foot was the best way to move forward, not for the security of our country, but not for the security of other people. And in fact, in George Washington's farewell address in 1796, the great rule of conduct for us in regard to foreign nations is, right, in extending our commercial relations to have with them as little political connection as possible. Washington saw entanglements, not pacifism, as the danger, right? And I think there's a lot that backs up this assertion. It's not simply just Washington's observations, but many others. When we look at Thomas Jefferson during his inaugural address in 1801, peace, commerce, and honest friendship with all nations, entangling alliances with none. America goes not abroad, and this is by John Quincy Adams on Independence Day speech in 1821. America goes not abroad in search of monsters to destroy. She is the well-wisher to the freedom and independence of all. She is the champion and vindicator of her own, right? So again, look, it's not aggression, right? In the end of the day, this is not aggression. There's no idea of this idea of leading with a cudgel. There's not this idea of leading with this war footing all the time. This idea of like we have to do this, we have to do this, we have to do this. There's an enemy here, there's an enemy there. This is not the message that they had. Instead, they found that the best way to pacify and prevent potential enemies was commerce and the ability to have peace and friendship and to do the very best that we can to extend our hands in all of these different matters. Now, look, it's not that they were ignorant about the fact that there are always going to be nefarious people, but they found the way that if you want to pacify the potential for and mitigate the potential for enemies and people who would seek your destruction, these were some of the best ways to do this. Now, let's expound upon this a little bit. The founders rejected pacifism at all costs, as I had just mentioned. They believed in strong defense and also rejected the opposite extreme of militarism, right? And you saw this in the way that they had kind of set up and ordained our defense initially, right? There was a lot of weight that was put on the militia, and we were never intended to have a standing military. And this was not to say that people couldn't be prepared and that people couldn't develop and be able to move forward as time goes on to have better and better implements to be able to defend ourselves. But it was not leading with a foot of militarism, right? It was a sense of strong defense. They were not pacifists at all costs. And I think that's a big myth that a lot of people tend to push, but it's something that is easily dispelled. Hegseth, however, frames pacifism as childish. The founders framed prudence and restraint as statesmanship, something of which I don't think the United States has seen for a very, very long time, for decades, if not more. Statesmanship, diplomacy, friendship, commerce, and really well wishes were seen as the bulwark to promoting a very, very good sense of defense amongst other necessary things, right? But they felt that leading with these things was going to be the most effective in mitigating any potential enemies or threats from abroad. And certainly we also know of the threats that they viewed from within. So moving on, in section 2, the costs of war. James Madison had some political observations here. Of all the enemies to public liberty, war is perhaps the most to be dreaded, right? Because it comprises and develops the germ of every other, right? So when you look at war, what do? You get more of a militaristic state. You get more taxes. You get more excuses as to why we have to do this or why we have to do that. You get the degradation of liberty and rights. It a germ that truly, really does give way to every other thing that we see today. And he was spot on with this. In continuing, in war, the discretionary power of the executive is extended. Its influence in dealing out offices, honors, and emoluments is multiplied. Okay? And all the means of seducing the minds are added to those of subduing the force of the people, right? So again, it was essentially expanding the power of the state, expanding the power of the executive, expanding the power of government, but reducing the force of the people, right? And the will of the people. So these are observations that Madison had, especially as it pertained to war. And we know, all of us that are here, we're all fairly intelligent people, and we've understood that the pattern is that once government has and gains more power, it never relinquishes that power willingly. No nation could preserve its freedom in the midst of continual warfare. What is something that we've been in for a very, very long time, since I would argue actually probably World War II. We have been in a continual and or perpetual state of warfare to some degree or another ever since then. There's seldom really ever been like an actual time of peace, to the point to where we haven't been involved or intervening in some area of the globe or another. There's always this perpetual need and craving and want for having to be in war. And as a result, liberty and rights and freedom cannot exist. They can't be preserved because there's always this constant, this constant crisis, this constant need in warfare. Let's expound upon this a little bit further. Madison warned, war expands executive power. The president seizes emergency authority. Debts pile up, taxes grow, standing armies rise, and liberty ultimately, it shrinks, right? And we've seen this. We have seen this more in our lifetime probably than just about any other, but it does have a root cause. And we do see these things where they start and how they eventually expand and grow and to the monster state that we have today. And this is, he was spot on when Madison talked about all of the growth of these things. It's not just the militarism. It's not just the idea of the standing army complex, but it is the taxes, the debts, this ever-growing sense of authority, which really does become a very egregious and destructive mechanism. Hegseth's vision of the nation, always ready for any war we choose, ignores these costs, right? It genuinely ignores these costs. And we're going to get to the any war we choose point here shortly, because I think that is a phrase that people really should be aware of during Hegseth's speech. It's a very dangerous phrase, in my opinion, but not just in my opinion, also in the founders' opinions. The founders lived through it. Britain's endless wars were one reason they revolted, because all of the wars accumulated debt. These debts required taxes, and these taxes eventually were levied against the people. And quite frankly, the colonies really did take a burden of that. And as we saw, it became more and more egregious as time went on. So they learned, they understood the lessons that perpetual war and the warfare state and the militarism that ensues from that really leads us to. The founders' definition of war, what was their understanding? And we kind of went over this briefly beforehand, but I think it's good to kind of mull back over the details because they are important. The founders followed a classical law of nations writers like Emmer de Vattel, Law of Nations, Hugo Grotius, and William Blackstone, right? War was defined not by scale, but by any hostile act between sovereigns. Blackstone commentaries, it is the exercise of violence under sovereign command against such as to have offended, right? And by Vattel, every act of hostility by one sovereign against another is an act of war. This is what our founders fundamentally understood. There was no limitation, there was no scope, there was no like, oh, we're just gonna do this over here, and it's not really an act of war. No. And as a matter of fact, we're gonna look and see some of the ideas, some of what it is that they understood as war. Implications here, a blockade was an act of war. A raid was an act of war. A seizure of ships was an act of war. A drone strike today, absolutely an act of war. See, it's not just this idea of this grand all-out war between two nations. It was literally any act or form of aggression that constituted war. And this was what our country was founded on. This is the founding definition and understanding of what war was to our founders, which is why they were extremely cautionary about war, why they tried to avoid war as often as they possibly could, and why it is that they really, really sought so many other means to try and prevent war, but also to try and prevent enemies abroad. So in conjunction with this, we look at what Madison has. Madison, the Constitution supposes what the history of all governments demonstrates, that the executive is the branch of power most interested in war and most prone to it, right? It has accordingly, with all studied care, vested the question of war in the legislature. To expound upon this, to the founders, war included every hostile act. That means Hegseth's doctrine of any war we choose is even more sweeping than it actually sounds. Take Venezuela, for instance, and take many other places that we have dropped bombs on or gone into. We're in so many different wars right now that it's almost incalculable, right? The cost of these wars, and not only just the things that we are involved in, but the cost overall of supporting other people's endeavors in war, the entangling alliances. These drain us. They deprive us. And whether it's our wars or somebody else's wars, our liberty and our rights takes a hit. We stray far beyond our doctrine, and we become the victims of growing government power. It would mean that any raid, strike, blockade, or intervention at all at executive whim, without Congress and without the people, right? Again, we see this idea of circumventing having to go through Congress, circumventing having to go without the people, and just doing whatever it is that we want to do because it's convenient or because it's not that bad. It's not a full war. It's not an actual war, but it's not that bad, right? But as we see, the founders considered even a strike on Venezuelan boats as constituting an act of war. Just think about that for a moment and really consider what it is the scope of war is. And furthermore, when you look at the quote by Hegseth, any war we choose, the founders knew we shouldn't be choosing war. We shouldn't be going out and just choosing wars and making enemies of it, whoever it is that we don't like. We shouldn't be out there gallivanting the globe, expending military resources and doing nothing for our defense of our own country. This was antithetical to what the founders fundamentally understood and the way that they founded this country. This is not the way that Americans are supposed to conduct ourselves. This is not the government that we are supposed to have. But unfortunately, when you have the expansion of militarism, of this idea that you can go in with every situation with a cudgel, you get a warfare state, you get an empire, and you get one that eventually crumbles under its own weight due to overstretching itself, overexerting itself, and fundamentally under its own hubris. That is the language, again, of empire. Any war we choose, in the fourth section that I would like to go over here, Hegseth's words, we owe our republic a military that will win any war we choose or any war thrust upon us. The problem here is, who is we? Under the Constitution, only Congress can declare war. Okay, the people, through their representatives, must consent to a war. If we means the executive and his military cabinet, then the republic is already dead. We don't have to worry about this idea of the process because we have now stepped into the era of an empire. And as such, the republic is dead. Madison again goes through, who are we to conduct a war? Those who are to conduct a war cannot in the nature of things be proper or safe judges whether a war ought to be commenced, continued, or concluded. Think about that. Think about what he just said there. Those who are to conduct a war cannot in the nature of things be proper or safe judges whether a war ought to be commenced, continued, or concluded. What he's saying here is that the ability to decide to go to war must not be rest in the hands of those who wage war. He was abundantly clear about this, and there are many other pieces that assert as such. There is a reason the founders laid the responsibility of going to war within the civil apparatus and not the military apparatus. Of the numerous warnings that they had, this is what their conclusion was. In expanding on this, Hegseth's rhetoric assumes the unilateral choice. The founders explicitly denied that power to the executive. In continuing along, to them, the choice belonged only to the legislature and by extension to the people. Hegseth's doctrine turns the military into the arbiter of when and where to fight, a hallmark of empires and certainly not that of a republic. A historical parallel, Rome's slide, interestingly enough, began with generals and emperors waging wars of choice, draining the republic, feeding ambition, and liberty died as empire rose. We saw this in Rome, and we've seen this in many other empires and their ambitions and their need and their lust for war. It grew and grew and grew, and liberty ultimately shrank and shrank and shrank. In conjunction with this, Washington himself warned, overgrown military establishments are, under any form of government, inauspicious to liberty. Yeah. Had a problem seeing that there for a second, so forgive me. But inauspicious to liberty. So you have two fundamental warnings when you look at overgrown military establishment and the whimsical nature of wanting to just perpetually wage war time and time and time and again, and the ambitions that come with it, right? In section 5 here, the true strength of the republic. Now, where does the republic actually get its strength? Where does it really shine? What is the thing that people should actually see the strength of the republic in, right? Well, we're going to talk about that here. The founders understood America's strength was not in endless wars, but in its independence, liberty, and its commerce, right? This is what made this United States strong. This is the foundation, the bedrock of who we are. Our liberty was our excellence. It wasn't the idea to just go and naturally just wage every war that we saw fit, but it was the idea that we could bring commerce, the principles of liberty, and let our independence shine. These were the abundant strengths that our founders fundamentally saw. Washington even says, observe good faith and justice toward all nations, cultivate peace and harmony with all. These are things that were seen as our strengths. They believed our example, not our aggression, was the best defense. Lead by example. That's something that we hear people talk about all the time, but yet we rarely, if ever, see that anymore. Everybody talks about freedom and how free we are and how much liberty and how much rights we have, but we don't ever actually lead in those categories. We have done so much to diminish so much at home due to a lot of the arbitrary and unconstitutional and illegal wars that we have and the side effects that come from them, that it's no wonder that many countries used to regard us as a liberty-oriented country. And they know the foundations of who we are as a people, and they recognize that we are so far off base that we're almost unrecognizable anymore. John Quincy Adams, America must be the well-wisher to the freedom of all, a champion only of her own, right? To expound upon these even further, Hegseth sees strength in constant war readiness. The founders saw strength in avoiding unnecessary war. Adding on to this, for them, a free, prosperous, virtuous people was the greatest deterrent to tyranny abroad and at home, right? Let me say that one more time. For them, a free, prosperous, virtuous people was the greatest deterrent to tyranny abroad and at home. So in closing, there's a couple things in this portion here that I want to reflect on. Hegseth ultimately dismisses pacifism. The founders dismissed militarism. And as a fact, the founders, it wasn't necessarily that they were about pacifism, but rather non-interventionism and not seeking war. Rather that we had the obligation to defend ourselves, but not seek aggression, not to seek warfare. That was not what they intended. Hegseth says, any war we choose, the founders said only Congress and only the people may decide war. And in conjunction with this, Hegseth glorifies this constant readiness for conflict. The founders warned constant conflict is the death of liberty, something of which I tend to agree with, very much so. As we move forward here, Madison talks about no nation could preserve its freedom in the midst of continual warfare. Again, hammering home this idea that liberty and rights die by continuous warfare, dies by looking for war, it dies by looking for this idea and this notion of perpetual enemies. Washington, overgrown military establishments are under any form of government inauspicious to liberty. And to add on to this, Jefferson even says, peace, commerce, and honest friendship with all nations, entangling alliances with none, something that has been absolutely been the bane of our country's existence as it sits currently, as it pertains to nations like Ukraine, nations like Israel, and so many other countries that we have entangling alliances with that deprive and rape our resources, the blood and the treasure of our people, for no gain, for no defensive purpose, and no constitutional or just cause whatsoever. The very thing that our founders constantly warned us about, as we see in all of the things that I've not only said tonight, but in some of my other episodes that I've proposed or that I've put forth previously. Adding on this, simple. Franklin was asked, what form of government do we have? A republic, if we can keep it. Again, saying that the republic falls upon us. He didn't say the Constitution can keep it. He didn't say a democracy if we can keep it. He didn't say a theocracy if we can keep it. He didn't say any of these things. He said a republic if we can keep it, which also indicates that whatever charter or constitution or anything that we as a people put together, it was our responsibility to maintain it. It is our responsibility to keep it. It is not the will of government. It is not the arbitrary idea that the Constitution somehow enforces itself. No, the people enforce the Constitution. The people keep the republic. We are stewards in this compact, in this situation that we have. And so we have to do this. Moving forward, there is a simple call to action here, right? rejecting a war first nationalism, rejecting this idea outright is antithetical to who we are as a country, who we are as Americans, and most importantly, the foundation of who we are. Demand Congress reclaim its constitutional role. And if they're not willing to do it, then we must take steps to ensure that there are people and mechanisms there that are enforced to ensure that this happens. We cannot simply just allow this to continue on. Refuse to let the military become the engine of ideology or empire. We must not allow the military to become the cudgel that this government uses against people abroad, but more importantly, the people here at home. And there's going to be something I'm going to say about that here near the end. So wait for that. As sentinels of liberty, remember the founders gave us a republic, okay? Not an empire. Keeping it is our fundamental responsibility. Our duty is to keep the republic. We are fundamental in this, okay? So that is my response to Hegseth. And I know that I didn't talk about the gender neutral things or all of the gender things and all of the other things, but these are the fundamental areas that really, really stuck out to me. And this kind of broadly covered, this idea of war first nationalism, this idea that we must constantly be ready for whatever threat. And, look, yes, we should be properly defended. We should be properly prepared to some degree, but turning it into this mechanism, this cudgel, this idea of forever crisis, forever wars, forever fear is so deprivational to liberty. It will overwhelmingly destroy us. And it has been destroying us for a very, very long time. There is something else that I really want to point out here. But before I do that, if you want to understand a coherent or somewhat rational perspective of a restructuring of the military that may potentially help us be better augmented defenders, people that don't just go and look out for every war that we can get our grubby hands on. There was a segment that Daniel Davis did on his podcast. It was either today or yesterday with Colonel Douglas Macgregor, who, as time goes on, I'm here to tell you, Douglas Macgregor is becoming definitely one of my more favorite people when it comes to the realm of warfare, the way that it should be fought, and the way that he really does tend to align himself with more of the founders' points of view than this empire point of view, and really bringing it back down to a defensive republic versus an offensive empire, right? So Macgregor is phenomenal, and I will do the best that I can to remember. My brain's been pretty racked, but there is a segment that he recently did with Daniel Davis that talks about the structure that he set up and how we can restructure the military, not only to be better, more effective, but to be a more constitutional, have a more defensive structure in the realm of constitutional parameters. And is it perfect? No. Is it a step in the right direction? I think absolutely it's a step in the right direction. And, all I got to say is what a shame it was that Macgregor didn't get Hegseth's position, because I believe that if he would have, I really do think that guy who has seen a lot, he's been involved a lot, he's been involved in combat operations, understands the top to bottom of a lot of different things. I think he had the right mentality for it. And I think he didn't get chosen because he wasn't willing to just continue with this bloat and this empire building and militarism that we see today. And that's what I would like to think, whether it would have happened. I don't know. I'm always a little hopeful, but there's a healthy dash of skepticism there. But I think Macgregor's on the right track, and I really want you guys to hear kind of that little segment from Daniel Davis's show with him on there, because he really did a good job of outlining a paper that he wrote on the restructuring of the military. And so I will do the best I can to put that down in the description below. Now, I didn't make it all the way through. I saw like bits and pieces of Trump's speech, if you want to call it that, after Hegseth had spoken. And again, there was something that really stood out to me that Trump had talked about. And he was talking about, he was going off of the militarism and a lot of the rah-rah that Hegseth was bringing up. And, you know, at one point, Trump had talked about, you know, training and strengthening the military. And it sounds really, really good. But then he had pivoted to this point where he talked about the use of military in American cities. And I was like, oh gosh, here we go. A lot of people are just like, yeah, we got to do something about this. You know, like we got to stop all the crime. We got to stop all the crime. A lot of people agree with him on that. And I am a very, very trepidatious person when it comes to constitutionality, when it comes to stuff like this, right? But what bothered me is the fact that in the duration of his speeches, he was talking about this stuff. He said, and it's somewhat of a paraphrase here, but I'm pretty close. He talked about how U.S. cities would be a perfect training environment for the military. And he said, not just National Guard, the military. A training environment for the military. And then, you know, he follows this up, or it may have even come, I apologize, it may have even come a little bit before to the buildup of this, but he was talking about, you know, the leftist radicals. We got to do something about this. The military is going to go clean up crime in the city. Folks, I'm here to tell you, if there's anything you should take away from this, it should be extreme trepidation. Extreme trepidation. The founders explicitly warned that the instruments of defense abroad are bound to come back and turn eventually on the people themselves. The instruments of war abroad coming back to America to be used on the people themselves. I cannot tell you how dangerous of a time that we are in, that we even have individuals in power today that whimsically explore and we've already seen the use of military in the cities. This is a line that once it is crossed will bring a holy hell upon this country. And I don't say that lightly. This opens the doorway for that authoritarian boot to become complete. Your sheriffs will be usurped by colonels. Your police departments will be overseen by captains and majors, or those considered high enough in rank to oversee districts. Instead of your local sheriff coming to your door, you could have a U.S. Marine coming to your door. You could have a ranger, an Army Ranger coming to your door. You could have the 10th Mountain Division coming to your door. And what would be the cause? We think there's terrorists. What would be the cause? Well, we hear there's unrest over here. It could even be lighter and more transient than that. And if you think I'm kidding, all you have to do is go and look back in history at how this starts. It always starts as limited. It always starts as just for a little while. We have seen what happens when there is such a willingness, and even the spoken words of using the military in a country amongst or upon their own citizens. The idea that President Donald Trump floats this whimsical notion that U.S. cities would be perfect training grounds is so dangerous to liberty and so dangerous to the average person, because this is the same apparatus that will sit there and tell you who and who is not a terrorist, who and who is not a threat, who and who is not the enemy. And when they get the ability to do that, think of how little of an excuse that they're going to need to come to your door. Didn't pay your taxes? Well, better send the 82nd into neighborhoods to go collect taxes. It sounds ridiculous, and it is cartoon evil, but it's historical. This is how it all starts. The mere suggestion. A suggestion is a very powerful thing, especially when you are the president of the United States and you are proposing this. Very dangerous. And to all of the people that sit here and cheer this on, when they're gone, when the Republicans are gone, and I assure you, my friends, they're not sticking around. They have messed up way too much in a very short amount of time. It would take an absolute miracle for many of these people to stay in power. I mean, Graham's always going to be there. He'll probably expire in his chair, right? But in the end of the day, if it's not the right, which has already shown a willingness to bring the military in your city, coming to a city near you, it will be the left. And you think Antifa is bad. You think all of these groups are bad. Oh, just wait until they give incentives. You think there's a lot of principled people out there until you tell them that their family gets an opportunity to live a little bit better, that they get, better health care, that they get put up in a tier of society. You don't think this happens? It's exactly what happens. It is a pattern. It is historical precedent. This happens. For all the people that sit there and talk about the fact that the right would never do this. Well, the right's already talking about sending the military in your neighborhood. You can sit there and argue and say, well, they're talking about doing it in Chicago. Okay, not everybody's a criminal in Chicago. What happens when they show up at the wrong door? What happens when they, attack the wrong person? The military was never, it's not trained the way that peace officers are supposed to be trained, right? They're not sheriffs. They're not deputies. They don't fundamentally understand civil law. They understand force. They understand aggression. They understand how to fight war. That is their role. What do you think is going to happen when they're sent into your neighborhoods? And here's the thing. With that, you'll have a lot of propaganda. And when you see the arrests on TV, you'll be sold this idea that every person that they arrest is a criminal. Every person that they arrest or bring in is a terrorist. They will sell you on the idea that every person is guilty of something before they've even been brought up on a charge. This is the type of thing that our founders warned us about. History shows us this. And something that I think is interesting for a little bit of nuance is, and just bear with me here, okay? I know people don't like the guy. It is what it is, but he's not wrong in a lot of things that he's remarked about the United States. Just recently, I don't know if it was today or yesterday, but Putin was just at a summit. He was at a conference or a summit, and he did a speech. And Putin remarked that the United States and the EU is looking more and more like the Soviet Union, the USSR, as time goes on. So when you have him telling you that you look more and more like the USSR, the guy that's supposedly the biggest monster in the world, it might be worth taking just a step back, really analyzing where the heck we're going. Because, my friends, I'm here to tell you, this is not the path we want to go down. This is not the path that we want to go down. So we have to make concerted effort. We have to be involved. We have to be a part of this. This was the prescription that our founders gave us in order to thwart tyranny, to create prosperity, to enhance and expand liberty, and to retain our rights. We must overwhelmingly reject the idea that a person like Trump or Hegseth or anybody else in this administration and administrations beyond would send the military into our communities with this idea of like, we're fighting crime, we're finding terrorists, because it doesn't take long for you to end up on a list. And I'm here to tell you, when it comes down to certain things like the Ukraine war, and when it comes down to certain things like Israel, if you said any little bad thing, all they need to do is say that you're a terrorist because you didn't align with whatever the narrative of the day is. That is how slippery the slope is. And you'll have a 75th Ranger at your door going through your neighborhood because you're a terrorist, because you had a difference of opinion. We already see it. You can't even say anything about Israel in this country. Ukraine's got their little blacklist of Americans. We know this. Our government knows this, and they do nothing to protect Americans. And yet we're supposed to believe that these wars that we're fighting are for our defense, but yet we allow other countries to come in and tell us who's a terrorist, who's a criminal, and who's not, to dictate policy. Wake up. You got to wake up. This government is really becoming destructive of itself. And these types of conversations that are being had, these types of the wording and the phrasing it's where it all starts. So we got to be very trepidatious. We have to be very, very aware of the things that are going on. And we have to outright reject these things. We have to. We have to take the stand. We have to make the stand. That's why if you haven't already, and if you don't know, like, one of the best steps that you can take is defend the guard. See if your state is running defend the guard legislation. Find people that care about it. Get involved. Support it. Help foster more support for it. Defend the guard protects our National Guard from being sent out to unconstitutional wars. There's a realm of accountability that comes with it. Do your part. Build your communities. Get involved somehow, whether it's through the American Liberty Caucus or somewhere else, but make sure that it is a situation, right, where liberty, rights, and the foundation of this country are at the forefront. These are the things that guide us. These are the torches that guide us in our endeavors. You know, we're in some very dark, trepidatious days, and I'm here to tell you, at this juncture, and it's been building for a while, that threat is not coming from necessarily entirely outside. We got a lot of our own problems here. So, with that being said, I'm gonna end it here. I'm gonna take a minute here just to scroll through some of the comments and read what you guys and gals have to say. But I hope you enjoyed my commentary on at least part of some areas of the address, and I hope you guys and gals were able to get something out of it, and were able to walk away a little bit more informed, a little bit more aware, a little bit more, perhaps walking with a little bit more trepidation as time goes forward. It's very easy to get caught up in very emotional diatribes and in the rah-rah speech and all of that, but we got to look through it. We have to look through it. So I'm just going to move back up here. Take a look. So there's a couple quotes here, or a couple points here. Let's go. Let's see here. Gene the Machine, it's good to see you. CLS, good to see you. David, great to see you. I just want to go through here. So Centerline Systems does. Guy 1, hey, you met with those Americans yesterday. What did you think? Guy 2, great business opportunity and good folks, but they're badasses, so don't mess with them or you'll get messed up. That's that would be an interesting conversation to hear from somebody. I would like to hear. I would like to be a fly on the wall of really at this current juncture what a lot of people think of us. I would be willing to say that maybe not necessarily the American people, but I would be willing to bet that there's very, very few countries in this world that we subsidize that even have a high opinion of us, and that's probably because we give them everything and their dependents. We the people have allowed politicians to pervert the language so they can conduct limited operations. What happens if the other guy doesn't agree with the whole limited aspect? Yeah, and I mean that's a great question. And as a matter of fact, when Douglas McGregor was on, he was actually on 2 times, almost back to back on Daniel Davis's show. And, he was saying, he's like, with all the command staff that were sitting during that speech that Hegseth and Trump gave, he was like, how reprehensible was it that none of those people had the balls to stand up and say, absolutely not, I won't be a part of this. And that is a portion of it, Mark. I do think that we need men and women in the service to stand up and say enough is enough. There at what point, everybody talks about reform, everybody talks about changing, but then, it's just like, as soon as that voice pops up, people don't want to get into it. Right. Or they steer away from it. And we need those voices. We need the people that say, no more, not enough. I'm not going to be a party to this. This is wrong. This is absolutely wrong. We cannot do this. And I think that's what it needs to take. So during those conversations of the limited aspect, we need to defer to the founders, and we need to defer to the principles and the foundation that we have and say, absolutely not, no more. But we need men of character to do that. And we need men of principle to do that. And it's becoming, at least as it seems right now, it seems few and far between, at least as that conference was concerned. And there were women there too. So women having the gall to do that. I mean, they're not above it at all. So let's move down here. The press is the CIC when the representatives vote for war, and in so doing place the press in that position of authority. War fighting still must be a politician, elected official in that capacity. Yeah, I mean, that's, like that, that authority, that permission is granted from the people, right? And from those people through the representatives. That war is the congressional authority. They are the final say when it comes to this. The founders made this abundantly clear, with one small caveat to the executive, which is the immediate repulsion of an ongoing or imminent, or oncoming attack. That is the only time that there is like the caveat there, right? But it's a very stringent caveat. So now the war-making authority, that power was vested into Congress, and they're so by the people. And that is very, very important to understand and discern. Let's see here. Going down, McGregor is the GOAT, 100%. I think Douglas McGregor is fantastic. And like I said, I'm going to try and link Daniel Davis's. Hopefully, I can get a segment where McGregor breaks it down. But his idea of restructuring, I think, makes a lot more sense, and it's coherent and cohesive, which is something that didn't really seem to come through between Hegseth and Trump, in my opinion. And I feel like a lot of people kind of walked away just more confused than anything else. Let's see. Would have loved to have served under a man like him. Yeah, I mean, McGregor and even Daniel Davis. And then there's another gentleman, Matthew Ho. All three of those guys were Matthew Ho and Daniel Davis were whistleblowers as it pertained to the wars in the Middle East. And Colonel McGregor is definitely a titan amongst them as well. Very outspoken, very against unconstitutional and illegal wars. They really, really are the type. They are the caliber of people that we need a lot more of in the military today, to say no more and to stop this ongoing this realm of just militarism. It's like, if you take that oath to defend and uphold the Constitution, that means every way that goes. And so if there's something that is unconstitutional, like McGregor said, there is a process, there is a way to do that. You have the right to do that in the military, to be able to bring these complaints forward and to be able to address these things. And McGregor's a smart guy. And the more and more I listen to him, the more and more, him and Davis and Matthew Ho and so many other bright and intelligent people that really have seen the situation for what it is. They get it and they understand the direction we need to go. So moving down here, sounds like a true GOAT. Yeah, you're not wrong, Gene. He is definitely a titan. Stay frosty. All of those speeches were propaganda for war, totalitarianism, 100%. And I wanted to just bring this up because there is really, it's not just here, but it's the preparation. A lot of people are suspecting that we are going to actually invade Venezuela. There's a lot of heavy speculation that they think we're going into Venezuela, and God help us if that happens. Because if you didn't think that the South America was galvanized already, we are going to have a huge problem. And that's not even my words. That's Colonel McGregor's words. As a guy who's been there, done that, seen it, in various areas of how things go well and how things don't go well, we will create a situation that will be heavily destructive to our population in more ways than one. And it'll only just be yet another folly that we will have to endure, that we don't need to. And I am very, very concerned that if we do enter Venezuela, man, there's the blowback and the consequences from that are going to be horrible. The Tomahawks thing to Ukraine, like Davis and McGregor and so many others have said, who operates those systems? It's not Ukrainians, as with many others. It's not Ukrainians, it's Americans. Doesn't matter if they're contractors or military personnel. You still have Americans on the ground that are either directly using these systems or they're providing intelligence. Either way, Americans are on the ground in Ukraine. They have been for a long time. And look, the Tomahawk thing is real. It's a very big problem, and it's yet just another area that has the potential to become very trepidatious. It's not counting China. And some of the issues over there, where there's also a lot of concern that we're going to be attacking Iran again. And so there is a lot of problems. So yes, notwithstanding those, the whole using the military in cities, American cities, and so many other things that came from that speech is, we have to be very, very trepidatious moving forward. So that's a great comment, by the way. And then I did see Mark brought up a posse comitatus point there too, and I do think that is something many people have raised as well. as a concern with this diatribe and these comments that were given. Republicans, Democrats, no different. I think that's becoming abundantly clear. They all go to the same golf clubs together, right? So if they're willing to sit down with each other, it just means, well, you know, you're the object of their desire, apparently. It's a very, very trepidatious system. So or situation. So look, that's going to wrap it up for me tonight. I hope, again, you guys and gals were able to get something out of this. Hopefully you were able to learn a little something. I may be doing an extension of this conversation on Saturday too. I'm going to go through some of my notes and see what makes sense, but I may do a leadoff segment on Saturday, just because of how relevant this is and how dangerous I think this situation is. So be on the lookout for that. Saturday is going to be the standard time, 1700 Central Time. So be on the lookout for that. Hopefully I get my image maker fixed and I can start cranking out those awesome thumbnails again. But yeah, that's all I got. Thank you, everybody, for stopping by. Remember, look, the torch of liberty has to be carried by each and every single one of you, guys and gals. That flame of liberty, you carry that spark within you, that spark that will rekindle that fire no matter where you go. So take that with you, take that torch with you, be the bearer of liberty, be the bearer of hope, be the bearer of prosperity, and be the difference in the change that you ultimately want to see, because that's what it's going to take. The founders knew this. The founders expected it of us. It is our responsibility. So go be that difference. And on that note, I'm going to leave us out here with a little bit of jams, and I will see you guys and gals next Saturday. Steel-clad fist, rise in the dark, shattered chains.